This is my house now. Take deep breaths.
What's up, everybody? I'm here to talk to you about a really campy, just not super amazing movie by any means. In fact, it actually got crushed in the ratings. However, I had a lot of fun with it, and, up until recently, I didn't actually know anything about it, so I was like, okay, why not? And, the wife was like, hey, let's just watch this movie, so, all right, let's watch it. And we did, and you know what? I had a fun time, so let's talk about it. So, what movie am I talking about? Mr. Crocket. Now, again, I didn't think this movie was particularly amazing, but I just had a weird amount of fun watching it. So, the first thing we're going to get into the visuals, right? Just like any show, any movie, any game we talk about, the visuals is the first thing anybody notices. And for me, it was actually decent in a sense of it was all practical effects. Like, it was like 90% practical effects, or like I'd say 95% practical effects, minus some CGI here and there that looked a little wacky. But in all honesty, it kind of went with the territory of what Mr. Crocket was, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But it was kind of funny, right? Like, I don't know if that was the goal, if it wasn't meant to be serious, but it was just, oh, okay, this is kind of funny and wacky to look at, and, I'm just going to have fun with it. And I felt like that was the goal. If it wasn't, then maybe I'm reading into it too much. But, again, I didn't think it looked bad. Visually speaking, in my opinion, it wasn't bad, right? The CGI was a little funky, but for me, it kind of played into, and I'll talk about it more. Actually, you know what? I was going to say talk about it more later, but it felt like I was watching, especially in the beginning, like an analog horror story on YouTube, right? Like Mandela Catalog, that type of stuff. I'm not saying it's the same thing. It was definitely like, the far removed, distant cousin that you never knew existed until you showed up at a family event and you're like, who is that? Oh, we're related. Okay, cool. But that was the feeling it gave me, and I think that's what kind of like got me going, right? I was like, okay, I could stick with this. Now, aside from that, there's not really much to see visually speaking, aside from like, the other dimension, quote unquote, all like the crazy over the top kills. But again, it was just fun to look at. So I was just like, okay, I'm pleased with what I'm seeing. Now, as far as the acting, right, it wasn't particularly great at all. Like, with one exception, we'll get into that here in a second, but it's also, I feel like, a victim of just bad writing. We didn't get enough time to really care about anybody, with the exception of maybe the main actress slash protagonist. I don't even remember her name. That's how bad it was in that sense. But it made me hate, one of our primary victims, which was the son, Major, because he speaks all of like 6 lines, and I wanted to punch this little kid in the face with every word he spoke until the end. And even the end, I was like, okay, yeah, no, I definitely want to punch this kid in the face now. Clearly didn't learn his lesson. But yeah, like, you don't really care for most of the actors, but I will say Mr. Crocket, the guy who played him, shout out to him. He took what was, in my opinion, just not a super interesting, overall role, and made it, like, really entertaining. Like, he was very over the top, clearly unhinged and insane, and, that was the feel. Every time I saw him on screen, I was like, yeah, this guy is really creepy. I was like, that was the big thing. He was just being very creepy, very unhinged the entire time, and it just puts you on edge. At least as much as a movie written like this could put you on edge, right? He also clearly had a penchant for the kiddos, if you know what I mean. So, again, clearly a creepy, scary dude who's got a lot of issues, right? And it shows that as we go on, right? I would have wished for, again, I might have expected too much in a sense of like in the beginning, I got the feel for analog horror, and I expected the rest of the movie to drop lore and drop information the way analog horror does and like make you put the pieces together, but it doesn't do that, right? The writing wasn't advanced enough for that. But what are you going to do? Now, moving on. Main story. Normally I say spoiler alert and drop spoilers. I don't really care. This one, again, it was something I wasn't expecting to make a video on. I just felt like doing it because I had fun. So, I'm going to get down and dirty with it. Cursed VHS tape with Mr. Crocket, obviously. And his whole thing is, he targets families and children in volatile households, essentially, right? He feeds off of it. We don't actually find out what he does to the kids. We just kind of know he kidnaps them, right? That's the biggest thing. And I wish we would have found out more. But moving on, obviously our main protagonist, her son Major, gets kidnapped. I only remember his name because his name is Major. And I'm just like, it's not a bad name, but it's just not a particularly good name, in my opinion. If your name is Major, I'm so sorry. Shout outs to you guys. I'm sure you're all dope. But this kid in this story, again, victim of poor writing, but they made this kid so unlikable. Not that it's which is kind of what's supposed to happen, because our main, his mom is dealing with the death of her husband. Major's dealing with the death of his father. So obviously kids react, in different ways, and they don't know how to handle those emotions. So he's like clearly like lashing out or whatever. But the entire time I'm like, I get it, but man, I want to sock you in the face, little kid. But anyways, he gets kidnapped by Mr. Crocket, yada, yada, yada. The race to find Major and the rest of these missing kids, it's on, basically, right? Honestly, there's a couple more things that happen, right? Some interdimensional stuff, but I'll be very, very blunt, right? This movie has a lot of standard tropes, right? The villain drops his own origin story, haunted dreams, victims all teaming up and saying, hey, we're going to team up and find, what's going on. And then there's liar reveals, right? There was nothing that me and my wife didn't predict ahead of time, right? There's nothing that stood out so much that I was like, oh, that's new. Not to say that it takes new things every movie, but you can take all those same tropes and put them in any horror movie. If you do them well enough, they're still great. But when you can see it coming from a mile away, obviously, it just is what it is, right? It's very meh. But again, I think, Mr. Crocket as a character, as the actor, he did a good enough job that I was like, okay, well, I'm entertained. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, that's all you should look for in movies, right? Yes, a good story, great visual effects, they all matter. But if you, at the end of the day, are entertained like I was, then who cares, right? Is it the next big thing in horror? No, absolutely not. Is it going to be an amazing franchise? Absolutely not. Is it, going to be on billboards saying, oh, Mr. Crocket #3, right? Even though they're at the end, they clearly try and set up, the possibility for a sequel. They leave it a little open-ended. But, I doubt they'd get a sequel, but if they kept it almost exactly the same, I'd still watch it, right? I was entertained enough that all, like, the negative about the movie for me, it was like, yeah, I clearly see it. But again, I was entertained. That's all that mattered to me. So, this movie, on a normal day, if I was being as strict as possible, I would give a 6. Like, that's me being very, actually, gracious. It could have been a 5. I'm giving it a 6. And honestly, because I had so much fun watching it, I'm going to give it a 7, right? So a 7 out of 10. Like, on just the sole premise that me and the wife were actually drastically entertained, like, to a surprising degree. Because I thought I wasn't going to like it, right? But it gave me the feel of, like, analog horror. I liked the practical effects. Sure, the acting and the writing wasn't very great, but again, I was entertained. So I'm going to give it a 7, guys. Solid 7. My hair's all over the place, so I'm wearing the hoodie. Solid 7 for me. I will catch you guys in the next video. Like, share, and subscribe. I've just been reading a lot of comic books lately, so, I'm going to be making some short-form content on that. and then a couple more videos. We'll see. End of the year is coming up. I'm trying to stay as consistent as possible, so I figured this would be a fun, quick video to make. So once again, guys, if you're having fun, like, share, subscribe, follow me on Instagram, follow me on TikTok. I will see you guys in the next video.